Hi, I'm Richard Osborne from UK Business Forums, and today I'm here with Stephen Renwick, who's a member of UK Business Forums himself, founder of Satago and of Tillo. I'd like to say hello. Thank you very much for joining me here today, Stephen.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join you and have a wee chat.
Yeah, that's cool. So when you first entered into business, from what I remember is working with your parents and in Scotland, if I remember correctly. Tell us a bit about your parents' business and then perhaps some of the challenges they faced themselves in being self-employed.
Yeah, so my dad in about 1979 or 1980 or something started his own business, and it started doing one thing, which was calibration of instruments, but it eventually kind of evolved into a company that did installation and maintenance of passenger lifts, stair lifts, disabled access lifts, so in the construction industry. And I always remember that business customers paying the business late was a continual problem. My dad was always having to chase people for payment. And you grow up with that, and it always kind of left a mark on me. I thought it was so unfair that these small businesses were basically having to chase all the time to get paid. And I always thought I could do something to tackle that using technology. And that's what led me, 30 years later, to start Cetago.
Yeah. And frustratingly, that's still a problem even today, though. You'll see it, whether it's in the media. Ministers will always talk about large businesses supporting small businesses by paying on time. But it's interesting that you working with your parents, it's an issue then, but it's an issue today. So with Cetago, now that's what was Satago, or what is, because it's still going today. So what is Satago as a product?
Well, Satago evolved a lot from the original idea. The original idea was, let's get data from companies about when their business customers pay them. Let's crowdsource this data together and then use it to generate reports to show who are the companies that pay on time, who are the companies that always pay late. Because that was always the problem. You never knew who was the good payers and who was the bad payers, because credit reports would tell you if somebody could pay you, but they wouldn't tell you when they would pay you. So the idea was that we would connect into accounting software from companies like Cashflow or Xero or FreeAgent, and we would pull in the data on a kind of real-time basis and create these reports. And the idea was quite good, raised a bit of investment for it. People liked the idea because people always talked about name and shame of who's the bad payers are. I actually wanted to be more positive and highlight the good payers. So it started off with that idea, but it quickly became apparent that that wasn't realistic because you have a massive chicken and egg problem. You start off with an empty database, and what's the incentive to share data if there's no data there? So it went through a couple of iterations. It became, the next step, a credit control tool. So you would connect it to your accounting software and it would fully automate the process of chasing your customers for payment. Then in the next stage, we integrated credit risk data from the big credit bureaus, and that was quite interesting because it'd show you in your sales ledger who was good payers and who was bad payers. And in the last step, which really transformed it, we started offering finance. So we did invoice finance based on the individual invoices that we could see in Cetago, and that was what became really smart because you already had a tool which was chasing customers for payment. You already had lots of data about who was paying who on time, and you had the credit risk data. So it's quite a kind of logical next step to say, well, you're going to have to wait 30 days to get paid, but if you want to get the money in your bank account today, you can do that with a couple of clicks in Cetago.
Okay. And you mentioned that it transitioned quite, a few times throughout its journey. It seems, I'm interpreting, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that at the very first iteration was perhaps born out of frustration of seeing the issues that your parents were facing in getting paid, and as you said, name and shame. What what sort of thought processes triggered the stages? So as the product evolves, so when you're in that situation and you launch a product at one stage and it goes on to the next and you evolve, what triggers or thought processes or sort of inspire those different steps?
Yeah, I mean, the first step was naive optimism, idealism, because I had this idea, everyone will do this, everyone will share data, because everyone wants the same thing, and that is people to pay on time. It quickly, I mean, it got press, it got in the newspapers and stuff, and I had a lot of people sign up, but the activity wasn't good enough. So, you know, when you look in your own product and you see a spike of users and then it comes down again and then it never goes back up, you know you've got something that is not sticky enough. One of the most important things with any product is that it has a very, very quick wow moment. You know, you use a product and you go, wow, that really works. And obviously with an empty database of payment data, there's no wow moment. So to make the wow moment, that was the next stage of really building an active credit control tool. And then, I mean, this is arguably the sort of mistake that I made, is a lot of what we built was driven by my assumptions and my kind of instinct, which, you know, with hindsight was not entirely wrong, but I didn't speak enough to the actual customers that were using the platform to ask them what they really wanted. I more or less made, I think I thought I was some kind of Steve Jobs type entrepreneur, and just said, well, you know, if you ask people in 1900 if they wanted a car, they'd say no, they wanted horses.
That's quite an interesting point, really, about customer feedback. And I know at certain stages, looking through sort of some of your history on UK Business Forums, for example, you asked for certain bits of feedback on your website. You asked questions around people's credit control. So I imagine, you know, there was some feedback along that way that would have helped with some of that. But it's interesting to hear, because I think we're all guilty of it, is you, and I include myself in this, you have your product and you get sort of swept away in the excitement of building the product of things that seem obvious at the time, but in hindsight, you know, market research is invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, market research means actually speaking to the people that are using your product, and also working out ways of asking questions so people don't tell you what they think you want to hear, because, you know, most people are nice, right? They don't want to hurt your feelings and say bad things, so you've got to be quite careful of that. But yeah, I mean, on the UK Business Forums, I was on there discussing late payment in general. Like, the topic affects everyone, so I always wanted to talk about it with people. Get feedback. How are they currently doing it? How do you feel about chasing customers for payment? And then there was the more kind of generic things like, here's my website. Does it actually explain what we do? And that was useful as well, because that was the good thing about UK Business Forums. It's got a really diverse group of people on it, and they really, what was particularly good for me was they really fit with the profile of the people I was looking to speak with, because otherwise my network was almost 100% kind of tech entrepreneurs and people building internet businesses, but that wasn't the sort of people I wanted to speak to.
No, and it is finding your market for the right sort of feedback. One of the things you did do to sort of grow the business and, you know, grow Satago was seek funding from seeders and others. And there's, you know, some people may sort of go to, or want to go, or decide, or through fear perhaps, go down the organic growth option, or try to self-fund, or my funding was through 3 credit cards and a bank loan. The bank loan paperwork said I was building an extension on the house. So some people go down that route or try to grow out of the revenue they're generating. What inspired you to go for external funding?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain businesses that can only exist with external funding, because they're going to have a long time before they actually make any money. And you need to build the product first. In my case, I mean, when I started Cetago, when I started thinking about it, that was 2012, so more or less 10 years ago. And I knew it was going to be a technical product, but I was a non-technical founder. Like I couldn't build the technology platform on its own. And in those days, if you looked up advice about how to start a tech business, they'd always say, oh, your first money should come from friends and family. And I thought, well, my friends and family don't really have a spare £10,000 to give me to try and build this thing. And I didn't have any spare money. So Cedars was just getting started back then. And I'd met the founders of Cedars before. And I thought, well, this is a perfect platform to kind of democratize access to funding to start businesses without plunging yourself into debt. So I started on there, raised the first £30,000. It was a lot easier than I expected, but I think that's just because I was the first project on there. And I got the £30,000, and that allowed me to build the prototype that kind of kicked everything off onto the next stages. And later on, I raised more money from kind of venture capitals and business angels and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I almost know the answer here, but with that funding, did that really expedite the product growth?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have existed without that, because I used that 30,000 to pay for a designer who built the website and the kind of the user interface, and most importantly to hire a contract software developer who was based in Russia and became like he's still working for the business today, like 10 years later, even though I've left it. He's moved from Russia to London, and he was basically the main architect of it. And once it was built, it got a bit of press. I got invited to 10 Downing Street to talk to ministers about late payment. I found a technical co-founder, and then we got the investment. So at the next stage of investment, I was always going to need more investment, and ultimately my mistake with the company, because it kind of, it's doing well now, but it ended badly for me. But my mistake was the wrong type of investment in the end. And investment is a very, it gets fetishized in certain sectors. Like people think, oh, you have to raise investment, and they talk more about the investment raising than they do about the business. But it's a lot more feasible these days to start a business and get it profitable without taking any investment than it was 10 years ago.
So that's interesting words to use, the wrong type of investment, because you're talking there, meetings at Downing Street, the level of publicity and everything that the business and yourself were getting during that time. You only have to do a couple of Google searches, and which I did before our conversation today, and you was everywhere. So when you look at that, and as I say, picking up on your term there, it didn't end well. What happened, and what do you mean by wrong type of investment?
So I mentioned that the product evolved from being a credit control tool into being a finance tool where we would buy the invoices. But that actually meant the way we did it, we basically switched from being a technology company to being a finance company. And running a finance business, when you're actually doing lending, is way different from running a technology business. And arguably, people who are not from a finance background should not be doing finance businesses. The actual investment, I mean, it maybe wasn't the wrong type of investment per se, it was the wrong investors. Like my network was entirely technology investors, and what they want to do is they want to invest in a business where the money is used to build product and do marketing, and that's it. But once you become a finance business, obviously some of the money has to be used for actual lending. And no technology investor wants their money to be used to lend to people. So you need to get debt from somewhere else. And the people that give you debt, they always want to make sure that there's some equity in the business. That is the first money you lose if you actually lose money on a bad debt. And this world was like a million miles away from anything I knew about or was really used to. And so I didn't speak to the right investors, which meant I didn't have a great choice of investors when I did eventually raise money. And really I raised too little money. I was still thinking like a technology investor. I only wanted to give up 20% of the business to new investors. And I had some other investment offers, but they would have bought more than 50% of the company, which effectively would have meant it was their business. And I declined those offers. But now I think about it, those were probably the only sort of investment deals that were feasible for a business that was becoming a finance business.
Okay, so picking up on that last comment really about perhaps they were the only sort of deals. What sort of takeaways, to use the term lessons learned. So having gone through that experience, because I think it's important to say that Satago is still going today, isn't it? And it's a very successful business from what I can understand.
Yeah. So I mean, it's maybe I should wrap up what happened, because we ran out of investment. I couldn't get any more money, and we were not making enough money to be sustainable. So I had to do an administration, pre-pack administration deal, and the company got bought by a private equity fund in London, and they since invested a lot of money into it, and now the business is on the London Stock Exchange in a little group called Trufin. They've got a commercial pilot deal going on with Lloyds Bank. The size of the team seems to be about, it's about quadruple what I left it. So it looks like it's doing quite well. And there's still people that I hired in the company running it, like the chief operating officer I hired. So it looks like it's doing, obviously I don't know the details, but it looks like it's doing quite well now, because the actual business was very good. Like what we built was good, the idea was good, the marketing and the etc. Or at least the branding was good. We just never managed to get distribution right. So yes, it's still going away, still providing a lot of finance to people, and seems to be doing quite well.
I'd to commoditise the sort of view here. So I don't know if you watch Dragon's Den, but in listening to what you're saying here, I'd liken it to twofold really: having sort of the right expectations of how much the business needs to deliver long term. So if you and having the right dragon, to use Dragon's Den terminology, having the right investors. That's what I'm taking away from what you're saying there. Really, is sort of two key aspects.
On the investment side, yes, yeah, exactly. The other big takeaway was, and I've done this a lot more with this business, is arguably more important than the product and the business, what you've built is your go-to-market strategy. Like, how are you going to reach people? Because it is way, way, way more difficult than you expect. And the optimistic, naive entrepreneur always has this kind of, if you build it, they will come idea. It's so good that surely everyone else will see how good this amazing widget is and will just come and beg me to use it. And it never, never, never happens.
We, on UK Business Forums, in the 19 years that UK Business Forums has been running, you see people come onto into the community with these high dreams, high aspirations, which you need that sort of energy to build. But occasionally you see somebody come along and they say, we've got this great idea, this is what we're going to do and it's going to make me rich. And exactly as you say there, the route to market is not thought through as well as it could be, or they think it's a great idea, and then they'll receive some critique from some of the other members of the community and think, everybody hates me, this is horrible, you're all horrible. Where the reality is sometimes I would much rather people tell me what's wrong with something I've said than people pat me on the back and say, oh, that's brilliant. You learn so much more from the critique you get when you're going through that process. You mentioned sort of what you're doing now. So that was sort of nice opportune moment to sort of move into sort of your current business, Tillo, and what you've gone through the same exercise of raising funding with this, which I think is really interesting because I fully expect that you've got a slightly different approach to how you went into funding. So tell us a little bit about what Tillo does, and then if we sort of move into the approach you've taken into funding for this business.
Yeah, so Tillo is a quite different business. It's much more technical. What we've built or developed is kind of data infrastructure software. It's software that's very good at taking data, unstructured data, which comes from different sources, and then matches it together and then makes it accessible regardless of the scale of data and very, very quickly. So it's used for use cases such as, for example, fraud detection. You know, if you've got if you're wanting to look at a new account that's signed up, and you want to see, okay, this person's just signed up, have I seen this person before? You need to connect that data, which is maybe just a person's name and their address, to all the data you've seen before, and do this very, very quickly, all in less than like 500 milliseconds. It's what we call entity resolution, or data record matching. We've built a technology to do that, and yeah, we've just raised the investment round. We're a very small team, and we're kind of doing our first pilot contracts with customers now.
I think you should have a look at one of the interviews we've got coming out with Companies House soon. They're doing a lot of work and building a lot of platforms with fraud detection around those sort of things. So it's quite fraud, and in particular technology. As the world is getting smaller with various online platforms, data is almost, in fact I will say, much of a commodity now, where it's a bit like an intangible product that is the real value in a lot of businesses. So where did the inspiration come from for Tillo?
Well, we actually developed the technology in another company, so we're a spin out. I was the chief product officer at a consumer credit bureau in Germany, so I live in Germany now, and so I was working on building products based on data here. And we always had this problem. We were receiving hundreds of millions of data sets about tens of millions of people in Germany. You have to match that data together to say this is the data about, you know, Stephen Renwick. And that technically is very, very challenging. And eventually we managed to solve the problem. We built a new type of technology from scratch to solve this problem, to solve our own problem. And I thought, well, this technology is too good to keep inside one company just as an internal tool. Let's take it out and see if we can commercialize it directly. So I was very lucky that we've got technology that's been developed for 3 years in a mid-sized company in Germany, and the chief technology officer of that company and the lead engineer joined me as co-founders. So we're 3 co-founders, and 2 other people from the tech team who also worked in the technology have joined us as the first employees. So we've all been working together for 3 to 10 years. And the software has been, you know, very well developed. So it's not like starting off with a kind of minimum viable product. We're starting off with something which is enterprise level already, which is, you know, quite appealing to the investors.
Yeah, and you talk about fraud as a case scenario for this, sort of identifying particular users, but obviously data within businesses, it's some, particularly sort of the small, medium-sized businesses, may overlook what data they have, or may bring in disjointed systems as well. Now, where do you see the future of data going? Sort of asking a leading question there, but as people become more and more aware of what they've got, they either build up efficiencies or optimize it, whether it's their sales process, management KPIs, understanding that. Where do you see that evolving?
Yeah, I think I've seen some statistics from like IBM that said 95% of data is not used because it's not structured, it's not connected. And this is the problem that small businesses of all sizes face, is data silos. You end up with data in your marketing CRM, and maybe you got data in a customer database, and maybe you got data in some spreadsheet or some other tools here. And I think the future of making this data actually work for you is connecting it and making it usable. And that doesn't mean Tillo necessarily. There's lots of technologies out there for plugging data together on a small scale. So there's previously that was the sort of thing that only really sophisticated data scientists and software engineers could do. But more and more there are tools which are available to non-engineers like myself to connect systems together. So software like Zapier, for example, a lot of people might have heard of. It's very good at connecting almost any tool that you use together. So if you're using a particular accounting software platform and a particular sales CRM system and a particular email automation system, you would previously end up with 3 very disconnected systems, but using some of these tools, you can connect them together. Tillo exists to do that on a very big scale, and for kind of larger, mid and large enterprises, we could be a very valuable resource for just making more sense of data. So when you're doing kind of artificial intelligence or that sort of thing on the data, you're doing it on full data sets rather than isolated data sets.
Yeah, and my expectation, so correct me if I'm wrong, but is that then brings in the element of predictability as well. So if you're analysing what's happening, and this can be in any part of your business, if you're analysing what's happening, you can start to build up trends across so many different parts of your business. And in fact, if you look back to Satago, that's kind of where I feel that Satago started. You're looking at sort of data trends, and then you're looking at predictability around that. So obviously data's always been something that's quite a bit of a passion of yours. And so you're moving into where you are with Tillo, and you're looking at sort of all the information from all the different sources. Once you then can start to analyse that and then predict trends, you can then look at that as part of your business planning as well, and your sort of business strategy as to what happens if this data set here changes by 2%, 5%, what sort of impact of that. And that's for any business, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, that you're right. That's exactly what we're doing with Cetago. Can I use the data of the past to predict when I'm going to get paid in the future? And that meant connecting data from lots of different data sources. And yeah, like you said, the more and more tools want to try and predict how businesses are going to run, how your sales are going to run. Those tools themselves need data, and the richer the data, the better the prediction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like an exciting journey you're on again here with Tillo. Thank you very much. What I'd just sort of ask is, for the people watching this is going to go out across UK business forums as well, and there'll be many businesses that will be looking at various, whether it's sort of high growth, perhaps in technology. So based on sort of your own sort of experience of the journey you've been on, what sort of piece of advice would you give to somebody starting out on a similar sort of journey?
I mean, if by similar journey you mean raising money for a kind of venture capital backed business, the first advice would just be speak to as many people as possible. I mean, when I raised investment for this company, I realized I probably knew about 10 times more investors as I did when I raised it for Satago. And that's just because my network grew, and I've always made a point of connecting with people, speaking with people. So you have to do that. Don't be afraid to talk to people about your business idea. You see this cliche of people that say, I don't want to talk to people about my idea because you might steal it. It doesn't really happen, right? The ideas are pretty easy to have. Execution is what matters. So talk to people about the idea. Don't be scared to get the feedback. So yeah, at the end of the day, the most important thing is talking, but also don't assume you need to raise investment for a business. It's much easier. I mean, in my field, software, it's much easier these days to start a business without even hiring an engineer, because there's no code tools that exist where you can make fully functioning products without writing a line of code. And that's something you should look at.
Yeah, that's brilliant and really good advice. Thank you very much. So wish you the absolute best for the future. Thank you very much for your time here today. And I look forward to seeing Tillo grow and seeing more of it and yourself in the news.
Thanks, Richard.